Hello everybody, I am Jeffrey Hauser, author of the Learn With series. A colleague of mine recently asked how he could do two-way binding in Angular for a dynamically generated component in TypeScript. And Angular does not provide an easy way, but with some work you can get it working. I did some rabbit holing and experimentation around this concept because of the question, and I'm turning it into this podcast series, this screencast series about two-way binding. This episode explicitly is just going to introduce two-way binding and how you can use it. So imagine we have two different components. One is a parent component, one is a child component. The parent component has access to some value that it wants to pass to the child. And the child gets it, it can handle it, can make changes. When the child component makes changes, it sends those changes up to the parent component automatically. And when the parent component makes changes with that value, the child component gets updated automatically. That's the whole concept of two-way binding. Some other web frameworks often focus on a unidirectional flow of data through the application. Angular is actually different, and I find a lot of people new to Angular get confused by this concept. But that's what it is. Updates in one will automatically update the other, and the two are tied together. Okay, what I've done here is I've created a new blank empty project inside of IntelliJ, and I am going to show you, going to start with one-way binding, then expand this to two-way binding. So let's do, I'm going to input the forms module here so I can make use of the ng model tag. Let's add in input and value 1. So value 1, because we're using square brackets, this is an Angular expression instead of a straight text string. So for this to not throw errors, we're going to have to create value 1 equals some value. So there we go. I'm going to do just for spacing, and I'm going to output the value 1. And button click. And if you don't know Angular that well, this parentheses means there is some event associated with it. So the square brackets means basically pass a value or evaluate an Angular expression, and the parentheses means respond to an event. And we're going to value equals force change and debugger. Debugger. Now our app should have compiled. Yep. So we see some value here, and so our component, our input component, just using that HTML input, properly passed our value 1 value into the input component. But we change it, it is not automatically changing our parent component's value. However, if we change the parent component value, click change value here, the value 1 inside the parent component still equals some value, even though the input value is something different. But if we change this value here, it automatically changed to the parent component. So this is basically one-way binding. We pass the value in, but there's no communication back and forth. And changes to the outside, the parent component will affect the child, but changes to the child are not affecting the parent. So that's kind of like the default Angular way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use shorthand syntax here. I'm going to use its square brackets, which means pass a value in, and parentheses, which basically that does two-way binding in an Angular application. So now I change the component value, and it automatically changed the parent value, and we can tell that because of the value that's displayed. And if I change the parent value, the child value also changes. So that's how we can implement two-way binding using this special parentheses bracket syntax. So that's part one, and I showed you how binding works and how you can set it up in Angular using default Angular components or directives. What I'm going to jump into in the next episode, I'm going to show you how to create your own custom component to be able to make use of that two-way binding and that square bracket parentheses special syntax. If you're enjoying what you're seeing, please check out my book series at learnwith.com, which gives you a lot of information about how I use Angular every day to build enterprise applications for clients.